There we go. Hello and welcome to the Tavern Chat podcast. We are streaming live. It's a fireside chat with Jon Hook, author of Orcus on 34th Level for Necromancer Games, also known as Fireside Games. Jon, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
This is actually pretty cool for me because I used to do, and you should know this because Pex is like a mutual friend of ours. I used to do these fireside chats once or twice a week because Pex used to schedule them all. And he kept me on my toes. Now, Bad Mike and I grab somebody on Wednesday nights usually to do this stuff, but I enjoy these chats because we're all gamers, and that's the whole point to it. So now, before we delve into your latest project, I did a little research. I did a little looking up because I knew your name sounded familiar and I couldn't place why. But then I saw you had written stuff for Call of Cthulhu with Chaosium and for Goodman Games for the DCC RPG. So here's a question that I'm sure people, I don't know, I've been asked, but about myself. But how did you not only get into gaming, but how did you get into writing games material?
Yeah. First, thank you for having me. I have been gaming since I was a kid. I think it was Christmas of '78. I got the Holmes Blue Box.
Okay.
Under the tree. And that got me started. And I still freaking love basic D&D, I grew up in the era where as nerds, we would differentiate between whether you were playing Dungeons and Dragons or Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, right?
I started with Advanced, and God forbid I actually would buy the basic set. My friends would mock me because that's for babies. We were 12 anyway.
And they're completely different games, right? Yeah. But we didn't really know that back then. And so, I loved role playing. I still do. There's just so much magic to it. And I just love the act of role playing, right? And I love the creation of the games as well. Because when I was a kid, I really did gravitate to that so naturally, as I was primarily the game master. I was primarily the dungeon master, and I was building and drawing these dungeons and making them for my friends and stuff. And, so as I was growing up, I grew up in Houston, Texas.
Okay.
And, with the circle of friends that I was with, I was collecting mostly the TSR stuff, and some of my other friends, they would collect some of the other TSR, but some of the other indie games things. I think it's fair to say that my strong suit is Call of Cthulhu, and I was introduced to Call of Cthulhu first edition, but I didn't own it.
Okay.
My buddy Robert Heitkamp owned it and introduced me to it, and we freaking loved it. Loved Call of Cthulhu. Loved the aspect of the mysteries and going crazy, and the monsters are so more weird, and
it wasn't like D&D where your whole goal was to kill shit and take their stuff. It was, I just wanted to survive to the end of the adventure.
I just want to survive. And with Indiana Jones coming out also at around that time period, we really tried to kind of integrate Indiana Jones flavoring into our Call of Cthulhu. So our Call of Cthulhu did tend to skew a little more pulpy. And I'll never forget this one, overnight, spend the night slumber party. We're playing Call of Cthulhu. And the culmination of this, home scenario that my buddy Robert wrote up, of all, it always has the ridiculous setup, right? We were shipwrecked on an island that had a house. Why is there a house on this island? And then under the house were these secret catacombs filled with serpent people. And so as we were, we disrupted the serpent people lair. And so as we were trying to make our escape and get back to the dinghy to get off this island, I somehow didn't get able to escape out of the house. So I ended up running up to the second floor, and I ended up doing this Indiana Jones thing where I was going to jump onto a chandelier, swing through it, smash through a window, land in the yard, and then catch up to my buddies as they were running to the dinghy. And of course, with the percentile dice rolling, I did the swing, and I fumbled my roll, and I ended up going through the window and broke my legs on impact. And as I'm laying there with 2 broken legs going, please save me, I'm being swarmed by serpent people. My buddies were like, see ya. And
you're the sacrifice.
I was sacrificed.
Yeah.
I had to die so they could live. And, that's Call of Cthulhu in a nutshell. So it was a lot of fun. But I fast forward. I have always been, or attempted to be, very creative, and I thought I could do it through art, and I'm not a very good artist. I tried.
My parents are both very good painters, whether it comes to oil or watercolor. I apparently it skipped my generation totally because I have no ability.
I was fortunate enough to have my full college education paid for by the U.S. Army. I have I got the GI Bill, and I ended up majoring in illustration, in art. So I have a BFA in illustration, but I'm really terrible at art. Really terrible. And so I just kept wanting to create these images in my head through art. And then I finally figured out that I needed to deviate from visual art and go into like word art. And I started writing. And I have been able to tap into that same muse, that instead of putting it down as illustrated art, I'm doing it as these game scenarios, and it's really fulfilling. My very first published game scenario, back before Chaosium, when they were still in their 5th and 6th editions of Call of Cthulhu, Chaosium would run these annual contests, typically around Halloween. And I entered into one of the contests, and I was fortunate enough to be one of the 8 winners that they were picking to put into a published book of Halloween themed Call of Cthulhu scenarios. And that was my first one. And as soon as I got that one, I kept submitting to some of these contests that Chaosium was running, and I kept being one of the multiple winners for those scenario books that they were going to be publishing. And that gave me the confidence to finally kind of start reaching out to companies. I reached out to Goodman Games, completely cold soliciting. They weren't looking for writers. I just submitted something, and not that everybody can do it this way, because I will tell you, Goodman Games is not actively looking for new writers. I mean, there are certain times
they have their stable for the most part,
and they have an amazing crew of writers. And I count myself fortunate to have had a time period with them, and hopefully I can do more work with them in the future. But I feel like my time is so limited as it is now. But I totally lucked out where Goodman Games had a license from Chaosium. They were doing their Age of Cthulhu line of scenarios.
About that. Yes.
So I pitched, and Joseph Goodman was kind enough to look at it favorably and said, "Yeah, we'll give you a shot." And I've just been going on from there. I've been working with not only Goodman Games, but I've worked with Chaosium, as well as some licensees like Golden Goblin Press. So it's been a lot of fun.
It's weird how. Not that you look into it, you come into it because you put the effort into it. But I know, when I was 18, 19, my dream back in the mid 80s was to suddenly work at TSR and write games for a living, and that didn't quite happen. Do I write now? I put together Swords and Wits Relight, done a few other little things, but it's the time isn't always when you think it's going to be. Like you expect this stuff to happen when you're younger, and it generally happens when you're older, and kind of like us.
Yeah, I just 2 days ago celebrated my 53rd birthday. So
Oh, you're a young, and I celebrated my 53rd back in July.
nice.
So there, yeah, and that is what does amaze me, is that it's our generation, right? That is, I don't know if we're really, I don't know if technically we're first generation, because first generation would be Gary and Tim Kask and
Sure.
Frank and Steve Marsh and Chris Clark and all those. But we are the youthful generation of the late 70s and early 80s that found D&D, that found that magic, and it's touched us 40 years later. I don't think that there are many things in the world or interests that you can say that I was interested in when I was a teen, and I'm still avidly interested in. 53 is still middle age, right?
We're going to go with that for sure.
Yeah, okay. In my middle ages, because 50 is the new 30, I think, something like that. But yeah, there's not too much that you can say will have that kind of a hold on you so many years later.
I will say our generation, I feel like we were the first to be directly influenced by the brand new form of gaming known as role playing. I mean, It was brand new for us, that we were able to accept it. We were the target audience when it was created. We were able to accept it and grow with it. Whereas the vanguards, Gary and Tim and Jim Ward, these guys were the creators. They had to come from it from the aspect of they were war gamers,
right?
Because role playing didn't exist. They were war gamers, and then they had to create this whole cloth and shepherd it for those of us who were then young enough to be the recipients of this brand new thing and grow with it as it continued to grow. So I think there's real validity in both their generation as the creators and our generation as really the first group to kind of grow with it. And then those who came after us, it was already pre-existing. It's like my children are really young. My son is 11 and my daughter is 8. And, they're growing up with, Wi-Fi and cell phones and video games, and all this stuff is just, it's already, in the fabric of the world for them. And it's not something that was brand new to them. And that's what, this was brand new for us. And I think I'm fortunate to be in that age bracket. I think part of that generation.
Yeah, we were the generation with the Commodore 64s, with the I'll make my floppy disk double-sided by cutting a notch into it.
Yes, exactly. And then if you want to write over it, you put the tape over the notch.
Put the tape over it.
Yeah, put the tape over the notch.
And everybody had a friend that had all the games, and they would copy them for you. God bless them for that, because I know when I was 18, 19, I was blessed to have a Commodore 64 and be able to play things like Ultima. But, my son's 27. He's not a gamer at all. And I remember a couple of years ago, 10 years ago, I was running a game on, or playing a game. We do the Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds. And he's like, well, that's not very graphical. Dude, the graphics are in your head. Yep, there we go. Yeah, and it's just a different generation.
Yeah.
And I'm of the generation that I went from tabletop RPGs and actually went on to EverQuest 2, Anarchy Online, City of Heroes. My gaming group, as our family life and responsibilities and work, meant that we couldn't, play every weekend and, days during the summertime during, your college breaks, to squeezing out hours from your home, even on dial-up, God bless us, on things like EverQuest, and we it was still that camaraderie, but it wasn't the same experience. And now that same group that I played with back in high school are now putting out the feelers of, so Eric, what do we got to pay you to start like DMing or GMing or whatever we call it now? Because I told them I won't run 5e, and it's a good system. Don't get me wrong, but I got to run something that's old school, and it could be 1e, it could be Swords and Wizardry, it could be Labyrinth Lord or Basic, but it has to be something that I can run without referring to the books. If I have to refer to the books, I'm a bad DM.
I mean, 5e is great. I think it's a fantastic move and evolution for Wizards of the Coast, but I absolutely love Swords and Wizardry. Love Swords and Wizardry. For Orcus on 34th level, I wrote it in Swords and Wizardry, and it's being converted into Pathfinder, into 5e by others who are far more educated in those systems than I am. But I write, when I'm writing for Frog God or I'm writing for Necromancer Games, I'm writing in Swords and Wizardry.
Well, and that's good
it.
Because, like I said, it's a system that if you know it, and I'm talking whether you're playing complete or, again, I put together the light rules when I retired,
which are awesome. I should say
I've
read those and I love them. I think they're great.
Well, my niece was 5 when we published that, and I showed her the rules because she always wanted to play with my Dwarven Forge, and she's like, "Uncle," I'm like, "Yeah, is that D&D?" I'm like, "Yes, it is." So, and it's only 4 pages. I'm like, "It's only 4 pages." She goes, "You can teach me to read 4 pages, and then I can play D&D." I'm like, "You're a very smart young lady," but I've discussed this in the past, but there were design concerns with it, and it has to be able to be printed on a single sheet, even in this case, a large sheet that gets folded over. It had to have the ease of convenience. It had to have I was trying to make it only D6s, didn't work, but a D6 and a D20, because for people new to gaming, the dice are confusing. My wife, Rach, she games at conventions, God bless her, and she's avid when she doesn't game otherwise, but at conventions she'll game. But the D20 and the D12 and the D10 and the D8, if you're not a frequent gamer, you might not always be able to tell the difference. And, 4 pages. I run that at conventions all the time. I do not do pre-gens because I've never enjoyed playing a pre-gen. But with the Swords and Wizardry Light rules, I can give you the rules. Bam. All right. We'll start in 10 minutes. Everybody roll up your characters. It's just, it's more engaging. And I don't need to refer to the rules throughout the game. I'm not flipping through a damn book. But I could run Swords and Wizardry complete and not flip through the book either, because it really does. It's a system that, to me, I was an AD&D 1E player mostly. We did move on to 2E, but I like to forget that aspect of splat books. But Swords and Wizardry, to me, feels very much like 1E, without things like weapon speed and armor adjustment to your AC and all this stuff, that without segments, all these things that we tried to play with and frequently just said, it's going to the side. We don't need it. It doesn't add to the gameplay. It subtracts.
Yes. The thing with Swords and Wizardry for me is that the rules are so forgiving, and that as a dungeon master, I can make calls on the fly, and my players are, so far, knock on wood, have always been forgiving and have always enjoyed the flexibility that a game master can bring to the table in Swords and Wizardry. If you've got an archer this is just off the top of my head.
Mhm.
If you've got an archer who's on a cliffside and looking down and is firing at, orcs that are coming in, all right, and the archer says, I want to, dip my flame in oil or dip my arrow in oil and put it on fire. Where other games might try to gamify and have set rules for that kind of thing, in Swords and Wizardry, I can go, that sounds freaking amazing.
Yep.
Make your attack. You were successful. Roll a d6, and because of fire, add a +2. And nobody blinks an eye.
Nope.
It's a beautiful thing. It doesn't say in the book, add this or do that or roll this die or now you have to do this or there's a wind shear or it doesn't matter. Make your attack, and that was cinematic and great. I thought it was great. Add a +2 on your damage, and we just keep going. And I love that. I love that about Swords and Wizardry. So
the combats run very quickly. They run. I would say they run light, but it isn't heavy number crunching like it can be with other rule systems. Like I personally, I really enjoy the DCC RPG.
Yeah,
but I enjoy the adventures more than I do the system. And although people go, well, the book is so fucking huge, it is, but it's mostly charts. And once you've got the charts isolated, it's not really a heavy system. However, my mind works on that Swords and Wizardry. If I have a general idea of what's going to happen, DCC, 50-year spellcaster, you have a general idea that what you want will probably not be what results in the die roll.
Because it's all random.
Yeah.
Yeah. When it comes to fantasy RPGs, I have there's a smorgasbord of games out there, and depending upon the type of game that I want to play, I will gravitate to different games. So if I want something that's going to be completely, it's a one shot, over the top, cinematic, and just almost I'm freaking out on the director's name, but he's always famous for the diving two guns thing, right? The Michael Bay.
Okay.
A Michael Bay kind of game. I'm going to hit DCC, right? And I'm going to have either pre-gens or roll up these high level characters and go with that. But if I want to do something that's dark and crazy, also one shot, I might do Merc Borg. Because I love Merc Borg. I think that's great.
Presentation is amazing.
But if I want a campaign with long-running characters, a long-running story where you're exploring a world, and I've done world building, I'm playing Swords and Wizardry. I love Swords and Wizardry because for me, it brings to life novels. I can create a novel setting, a fantasy novel setting, and play it out in Swords and Wizardry beautifully.
Yeah. So John Miller says Swords and Wizardry is like 1E but without the bullshit. Pretty much.
Yep.
You'll have all your AD&D 1E classes except for the Illusionist. There is an Illusionist class out there written, oh my God, how many years ago now? We did Swords and Wizardry Appreciation Day, and somebody wrote up an Illusionist class with a full spell list. It is amazing. If you remind me on the blog site or an email at tencars.tavern@gmail.com, I'll try to find it and at least direct people at it. I think they self-published it in the end, but it really... Swords and Wizardry is 1E. I think if Gary had done a natural progression from basic, like the initial plan was, as opposed to saying, well, 1E is going to be for tournament play, which is kind of what it was built to be. So we have one set of rigid rules that no matter where you're playing, you can be playing at Gen Con, in a tournament, or playing out in California at a convention. You're all playing with the same rules, but the reality is you weren't, because as much as I love 1E, I'm still going back to my old my old original copies of the rules and finding stuff that I don't recall reading prior, and going, and don't ask me how surprise works in 1E, because there's tweaks to that, or weapon speed with a dagger against a two-handed sword with tight initiative, where the dagger suddenly can strike 3 times. These are wargaming rules that snuck in that I'm sure were never play tested, but they didn't play test much back then anyway. We put too much of a value on play testing.
Yeah, the turnaround for getting it to market was more important. So
yeah, well, I think who was it? Was it Steve Winter who basically said that the 2E splat books, the complete player handbooks, none of those were really play tested? Because I still have nightmares as a GM about Elven Blade Singers. All right, my old gaming group, when we get together once a year in person, they still bring up my friend's Blade Singer. I'm like, no, man, never again.
So I was in the Army when 2nd edition came out, and my best friend, who he and I met when we were in the Army, we were roommates in Germany, and we've been best friends for 35 years now. He and I were playing 2nd edition in Germany, and it was hard to get books and stuff. And I have no, I don't know if it's just due to having a shitty memory or just, whatever. I have no clear memories of the rules that were in the splat books. I only recall wanting to just collect them, right? I wanted to buy them. And in the passage of time and, out processing from the Army and my parents moving and stuff after I got out and all this crazy shit, I don't know what's happened to any of those books. I've had to recollect my collection over the years. And so I've only focused on basic and 1st edition. I don't have anything 2nd edition. I don't have any of the rule books. I have some adventures, but I don't have any of the rule books from 2nd edition on. I only have 1st edition and basic. So I don't really have memories, positive or negative, for the splat books.
Right.
Only that back in the day when they were brand new, I had that buying chase fever, got to get that fighter's handbook and but now I don't know where they are. I don't remember a thing about them. So
I think they're still on my main gaming shelves, piled behind other stuff that's piled in front of my main gaming shelves. But yeah, I mean, I had a complete collection only because the mail order hobby shop was poorly run. And I ordered 1 book and a poster, and somebody with the same first name, spelled with a K, Erik, got my poster, and I got the 10 splat books that he ordered. So then I was, so there's about a week where I was kept on getting all these voices, and on my answer machine, and I still can't remember. I don't know if it was Ernie or who it was from the hobby shop, but you really got to send that stuff back. You really, and I was like, I had a friend that was in law school at the time. I'm like, Ken, what do I do? He's like, you didn't ask for it, right? I'm like, no. He goes, what does your mail? What does your receipt say? He says a poster and the Complete Fighters book. I go, I didn't get the poster. He goes, but I got 8 or 9 of the books, whatever it was. He goes, unless they are going to ship you a box that's pre-stamped, he goes, you're not doing anything. That was their own fault. I'm like, okay. So I was like, I've got a complete collection. That was easy.
Oh my
I felt guilty for a little while, but not for long. And then I realized that they were. I liked bards, and I thought it was going to make my bard playable, but it most of them make your characters unplayable or overpowered. I mean, because a lot of here's the thing about the splat books, just in general, it's that they balanced in-game mechanics against in-game social restrictions. You can't do that because what's the first thing that people throw to the side? Alignment. Uh, I curse out the bartender and I threaten to kill him if he doesn't give me information. All these things that you would never do in real life, but they are trying to impose on PCs. That stuff never worked. You can't balance game mechanics by putting social restrictions on characters. It doesn't work. It has to be mechanic versus mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
That's me as a very poor game designer saying that. But. So now, and I joke with Bad Mike from North Texas when we do this every Wednesday that it's kind of like a hex crawl because we come into these chats and we don't come in with a. It's not a podcast where I have a list of stuff in front of me. It's like we're gonna hit point A, point B, point C. We go from wherever the adventure takes us. But you did write Orcus on 34th level, and what I want to know, besides where you got the idea for Orcus on 34th level, is how you pitched that to Frog God Games. Because that's an interesting pitch.
So this was a lot of fun because Edwin Nagy, who works with Necromancer Games,
right? And don't call him Ed. I've learned that, but okay.
Yes, Edwin. He prefers Edwin.
Yes.
So Edwin and I are friends, and Edwin reached out to me.
Really?
And yeah, Edwin reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in writing the Orcus Christmas holiday theme because they had decided that they wanted to try and do a follow-up to the first Orcus Christmas scenario. And hopefully this becomes a thing, right? Hopefully they do this every year. And so Edwin asked if I would be interested to do this, and I was floored that they asked me, and immediately excited. And I don't know, something. It just I was thunderstruck, and it just hit me. So the very first thing that I wanted to do. Kind of thinking back, because this is how I design, especially fantasy adventures, dungeon crawls, is I need the dungeon first. For me, I need the dungeon first, and then I populate the dungeon. But what I've discovered as I've gotten older is that I utterly suck at trying to draw and design a floor plan for a dungeon. Right. So I went online and I went to the experts, right? I found a Dyson Logos dungeon that he put out there for full free use.
Yep, that's what his Patreon helps support. Yep.
And we do credit and thank Dyson for the original dungeon floor plan. It was bigger than what I wanted to use, so I excised about a quarter of the dungeon that he had created and trimmed it down. But once I had trimmed it down and we kept the 3/4 of it, I just immediately had this idea about a candy factory that I was calling the Candy Crypt. And this was Orcus's Candy Crypt, Orcus Claws. And I immediately dove in and just started writing this. And I stayed in near daily email updates with Edwin on the creation of this Orcus on 34th level. I think I wrote a room a day. And there's like 14, 18 rooms. I forget exactly. And I was writing about a room a day. And I just had this energy level and enthusiasm for this project that I hadn't felt in a long time for some. And I was just hammering this thing out. And I was emailing Edwin and keeping him abreast on what I was doing. And he was just like, "This is great." He was really, it was very fulfilling to have the feedback that I was getting from him because it just kept my fires hot. Right. And I just had this momentum and I just did not stop, man. And I just ran right through on this thing. And it was, I had a freaking blast. So I really hope that when this thing comes out and folks are able to play it,
Right.
that they enjoy it as much as I did in writing it. I have already submitted, and I need to double check and see if they've been approved yet or not. But I've submitted 6 4-hour sessions at online GaryCon or Ethereal GaryCon.
Right.
And I will be running 6 sessions of Orcus on 34th level at Ethereal Gaming GaryCon. It'll be 2
Swords and
Thursday.
Wizardry?
Say that again.
Swords and Wizardry or 5e?
Swords
I
and
have
Wizardry.
to ask, man. I have to ask.
I understand you have to ask. I will be running it in Swords and Wizardry because that's the only system that I know off the top of my head, and I wrote it in Swords and Wizardry. But I'll be running 2 sessions on Thursday, 2 on Friday, 2 on Saturday. I was trying to reserve Sunday for me to actually be a player somewhere and stuff. But yeah, I'm running 2, 2, and 2 Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
I might have to jump in on that.
Ethereal GaryCon. So hopefully those will get approved and on the books, and I can start putting that out there so people can sign up for that. But man, I just freaking loved writing this, and I had a blast doing it.
And that's important too, because when you really enjoy what you're doing, it shows in the final product. Now, again, you mentioned you have a background in Call of Cthulhu. Now, did that influence you at all with Orcus on 34th level? I mean, are you taking some of that experience and translating it?
There are a couple of rooms for sure in Orcus on 34th level that were definitely horror inspired, if not mythos inspired. There is a monster that I was hoping was open sourced that I can use, and I think there might be a question on whether it's available or not. So I've offered a rewrite of this particular monster, so I basically kind of shave the serial numbers off on it.
Yeah.
And just kind of, I barely changed anything and said, just call it this, give it this new name, and keep everything else the same.
Yeah, it's like when I take beholders and they become eye monsters.
Exactly.
It's been done before, and it's not like the concept is totally unique. Oh, see, apparently, our random Facebook user, and here's the thing, folks, if you watch via Facebook, then unless you give Facebook special permissions, we have no idea who's commenting, but it is entertaining to listen to it. But I'm gonna be a betting man and say it's either Pex or
could be Edwin.
Edwin. It could be one of the two.
It could be Bill Webb. We don't know.
Oh, well, you know what? It could be Bill Webb. We don't know. Yeah, it could be.
But someone is saying that it's going to stay in, which is awesome. I hope it does.
All right. So there you go. So then I'm going to have to say it most likely is Edwin. There we go. It's Edwin. There. All right. We didn't have any money on the bet, but there we go. It is Edwin. Always good to virtually see you. Well, actually, not really seeing you, but good to have you in the room, Edwin. Actually, I think one night, Bad Mike and I will have to bring Edwin into Talking Crit, which is when myself and Bad Mike from North Texas RPG Con go about talking about the recent events in the last week of the RPG hobby.
Oh man, in North Texas, that is a con that I really want to go to.
You haven't been to yet?
And I have tons of family in North Texas. I have no excuse to not go.
Listen, the only I've been going for years now. I missed this year, obviously, because of health problems, but also because of COVID. Even if I could have gone, coming from New York, I would have had to isolate for 14 days. But North Texas, and I'm a born and bred New Yorker. And North Texas is like going to my second home. It really feels like that.
I am a native Texan. I was born and raised in Texas. I live in Kansas City now only because after my wife and I married and we graduated from Stephen F. Austin State University, right when we graduated, my wife was like, okay, now that we're married and we're graduated, we can leave Texas. And I was like, what? You want to leave Texas? Why? I mean, my parents were born and raised in Texas, and as their firstborn son, my middle name, I swear to God, is Dallas. Right?
Nice.
I am Jonathan Dallas Hook. I bleed Texas, and but I live in Kansas now and raise my kids here, and then I tell them about Texas, and they're like, "Dad, you're just stupid, whatever." And so I get that. But yes, I have Texas, so much family there.
But North Texas RPG Con, the atmosphere. I've gone to Gary Con numerous times, Game Hole, Total Con. They're all great conventions. But North Texas has a different vibe. It's like going to I don't know, like I guess a Southern family barbecue type of deal, where everybody that you see, and whether it's Tim Kask or Steve Marsh or anybody else in the gaming community, you can walk up and talk to them, and you can have just a normal conversation because you're not overwhelmed. Like Gary Con and Game Hole are thousands of people.
That's true. Although I did have a very similar, real personal experience. I have the unfortunateness of poverty that keeps me from being able to go to all the cons I wanted to go to. So I've only been to Gary Con in person one time, and that was for Gary Con 9. And when I was at Gary Con 9, I had a few hours of just open time to myself, and so I sat down at this table, and it was like a pickup game of Gamma World, and there's a guy sitting next to me who seems really freaking familiar, and I was always an art guy. I always loved the art in D&D and everything, and so I'm looking at this guy, and I was like, oh my God. I go, pardon me, are you Jeff D? And he goes, I am. I said, nice. Oh, I'm a huge fan. So I'm playing this Gamma World game with Jeff D, and for some reason the game got terminated, and the game master had to go do something else. So Jeff D and I are sitting there, and this other gentleman comes up and he goes, hey, you want to do lunch? He's talking to Jeff.
Right.
And I'm just sitting there like a freaking idiot. And this guy goes, hey, do you want to do lunch or play test my new game that I'm doing? And Jeff D goes, play test, of course. And he looks at me. He goes, hey, do you want to play test this game? And I was like, yeah, of course. He goes, well, this is my friend Bill Willingham. Why don't you sit down and play this game? I was like, Bill Willingham. I love you, Bill Willingham. I mean, I play tested a game with Bill Willingham and Jeff D and basically died at Gary Con. So I so want to go to North Texas to have the same experience.
Yeah, you will. You got like people like Merle Rasmussen, who we play tested his top secret game when that was going through, and Merle is just he's a rare gentleman. Even for Texas, Merle is just a gentleman. Everybody in Texas is pretty much a gentleman, though some are a bit rougher than others. But Merle is just a sweetheart. So North Texas, I felt really bad missing this year because I still had it in person, even though it was greatly reduced in head count, maybe like 80 people. But it's just very great convention and hanging out with the frogs. I mean, it's a unique family environment, but it's an extended family I'm very happy to be associated with. Even Edwin.
Edwin. Even if he has to be there, okay, Edwin.
That's okay. And I can say that because we've shared a flight, because he has to fly to New York. So I still remember being at the airport and having Edwin go, Eric, come on. Edwin, what are you doing here? He's like, oh, by connecting flight. I'm like, oh, I forget where we were going. Oh, maybe it was Game Home. Yeah, it's just weird how all that synergy works. So now, all right, I got one further question for you about Orcus on 34th level, and this is coming from. I have an idea how long these things generally take, which is as long as they take, because creativity has no master. Creativity is the master. But you said that it was you were doing a room a day. So how long did it take you to crank this one out and be able to submit it to Edwin and say, hey,
this one, I have never written this fast. I was just being horsewhipped by my muse, and I had Orcus on 34th Street or 34th level.
I was thinking the same thing. Don't feel bad.
Well, I named it after that on purpose to be a play on the Christmas movie. But I had this completely written and submitted in under 3 weeks.
Holy shit.
Seriously, I have never moved that fast. And I had other things that I was working on at the time, but when this request came in, something about it I've said it before, I was thunderstruck and honored to be considered to write this. And so something just spoke to me, and I immediately went, pen to paper, and I had this thing fully written and realized in less than 3 weeks.
And
it was unreal. I've never worked that fast.
I'm sure Edwin was like, you beat my time frame. I'm sure he didn't have everything lined up already, but that was probably good because.
Well, like I said, I was in daily emails with him, and he was like, "Oh, this is great." And he had a couple of ideas, to tweak this and do that. And I was like, "Okay, yeah, I can make this and adjust that." But yeah, we were just working live and just going at this at a breakneck speed, and it was just a ton of fun. It was so much fun to do. So much fun. I just had a blast at it.
All right. Actually, now you're making me really look forward to this one.
I hope so. I hope everyone just dives in. And I mean, honestly, I'm really hoping that this is something that just strikes a chord with all of the frogs and all of the fans, and everyone just, this becomes one that everyone just enjoys playing. I'm just hoping they have a great time with it.
The holiday special.
Yeah.
There you go.
And this the fundraiser that's going on right now on Indiegogo, the goal is they want to get the PDF out before the Christmas holiday.
I saw that,
which is insane.
Yeah,
this is really, really amazing. So, we've got, as of this show, I think there's, I think it officially says 5 days now. 5 days left to the funding campaign. It's over 630% funded. Yep. So,
it says 4 days left.
4 days. Okay.
$6,315 raised, 264 backers. Now, this is on Indiegogo, which I like Indiegogo because it's got flexibility. It doesn't have necessarily the built-in advertising that Kickstarter has, but it certainly. I've backed things on Indiegogo for a long time, folks. If you want to check this out, I have a link for you to go to. It's 10cars-tavern.games/Orcus. 10cars-tavern.games/Orcus. It'll take you to the Orcus on 34th level Indiegogo, and it will show Edwin that I sent you there and that you came from us. And trust me, it helps the show, and what helps the show in the long run helps the community, because this all goes back to you anyhow. So I really It was a great time, John.
Oh man, Eric, I had an amazing time. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I don't believe in much show prep. The peek behind the curtain is we spend a few minutes just talking bullshit before we come on, just to do that bonding like you would do in your neighborhood pub, and then and then go on from there. But really, it was a great time, John. I really appreciate you coming on the show because it's important that the gaming community gets to see and hear from the creators, because that's one of the great things about going to conventions. And believe it or not, you're going to be hitting that position where you are the next generation of people like you're Jon Hook. Could you sign Orcus on 34th Street for me? Yeah, you're gonna get there. Listen. As we get older, the vanguard gets older, and such is the way of it, man. But all right, I'm really looking forward to it, folks. As always, we are in the world of COVID, so use your common sense. I'm not a doctor. Don't pretend to be. And the doctors on TV are half full of bullshit anyway. Find a medical professional that you trust if you need further advice than common sense. That's basically all I'm saying on that. Be safe, be well. God bless. Roll those dice. And again, thanks to Jon Hook. And God willing, I will see or talk with the rest of you tomorrow. Wait, before we go, John, do you have a website or a blog?
I have a podcast. As you noted earlier, my long suit is Call of Cthulhu. I am a podcaster for the Miskatonic University podcast. It's www.mu-podcast.com. And we've got a Discord, and so I'm there all the time, and I talk about everything beyond even Call of Cthulhu. We talk fantasy gaming of all ilk and horror gaming. So please check me out there at mu-podcast.com, the Miskatonic University podcast.
There you go. All right, folks. On that note, we're out of here. Thank you so much for listening. Laters.